Welcome to our leadership lunch chat. This with Jen Wilson and myself, Amy Vetter. And as usual, we have probably too much on our list to talk about, but we know that there are a lot of changes that have come out this week with the deadline and just thinking about office moves and so forth. So we wanted to really start with contingency planning for these things that I think if the last year taught us anything is that you can't depend on just one plan. And it's important to kind of think of what your plan A and plan B and plan C is going to be as you're thinking through the year. So we'll probably just start off with the tax return deadline. And Jen, if you want to start with that.
Sure, Amy, and happy Friday, everybody. I can't believe it's Friday again, by the way. I feel like we just hung up with you guys and it's here again. So there's a discussion that maybe the individual tax filing deadline that is normally 4/15 might move to 6/15. We don't know. Ways and Means Committee recommended to the IRS that it be moved. I believe the AICPA now has sort of encouraged that as well. No determination has been made. I've said in social media that I'm predicting that it will get moved. I wish it wouldn't, by the way. I'm not sure that that's what's best for practitioners. And I'm not certain that another elongated busy season is what's best. But I believe that it'll get moved because of the IRS backlog and because we're still in this uncertainty and because of what happened in Texas. And there's a lot of people that had some terrible things happen over the course of the last 60 days due to weather. And anyway, I think it's going to move, and I think they're going to announce it after the 15th of March. So, I'm encouraging firms to think about, if this happens, what's our plan? So instead of waiting, and next week is, pretty quick if they decide to say it, but maybe they won't say it next week. Are you going to wait until they say it to figure out your strategy? A lot of firms have people planning vacations or time off or CPE or conference attendance in that May, June timeframe that will suddenly become the new busy season. That May 15th to June 15th presumably is going to be very tough if it moves. So, have you pulled out the firm-wide calendar to take a look at who's impacted? And are there firm-wide events? A lot of firms have their state of the firm meeting. They have year-end. They have performance reviews. They might do raises and bonuses. There's all this stuff that happens in that special, proactive May, June that becomes this not as doable. So I encourage firm leaders, or at least operational leaders, to stop, circle the wagons, look at the calendar, and just create a contingency plan. And for some of us, it might feel like that's a waste of time. Why don't I just wait till I know I have to change it? Mm-hmm. And my thought is, if you really stop and back up and say, what if, and you look at the possibilities, there might be some things you're about to commit to that you wouldn't. You just say, let's hold off a week. Don't sign that contract. Let's not buy those plane tickets or whatever. And I know in a pandemic, we have less of that, but I also know we're reopening. People are getting a little bit more comfortable meeting what's coming up. And maybe people are going to plan vacations this time for real. So anyway, those are just some thoughts on initial contingency planning for that 4/15 move if it happens. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the other issues is that, regulations and standards may change, that if you're going to finish work right now, that you might have to update. And I think it's really important to stay on top of that and how that workload is going to change if you have to go back to things you already did as well. And so just keeping that in mind, it's important, I think, to be proactive with your client and keeping them up to date on what's happening with all of this, because the thing is, most clients aren't paying attention. This is stuff that, is affecting you. And it's really important for you to understand with the clients, like how soon they want to be filed, so that you can plan workload around that and what risks that they're willing to take versus things changing. And they already file and have to go back, and would they pay extra for that? Would they not pay extra for that work? So that everything's really clear in your communication up front. Because I think that ends up being an issue, right? Like when you go back and try to charge for things like this, they didn't even know it was happening, and nor did they think it was going to be a big issue for the work that needs to get done. So having those conversations, I think clients really appreciate, to make sure that you are creating the experience that they want, and they know you're in it with them, and you're trying to fit within whatever budget. Because if they're not going to want you to pay for you to go back, then you might want to put off their work.
Yeah, or extend them or whatever. And I think, the conversation's really important, but I think also memorializing it in writing is super critical, because you might tell them a lot of things that to them sound a tiny bit mumbo jumbo when you're talking about, credits or timing, or how to retrofit them, or things that apply to 2020. They might not totally understand what you're saying there. And so they're not listening to, hey, I'm making this decision to go ahead and file, and I might be shorting myself. I might have gotten some, savings if I had waited, or they might not totally get, if I have to reopen this thing later, you will charge me. And I hope you will charge them if we have to reopen, unless it's your mistake. But if you guided them and they said they didn't want to do it, and then later something changes legislatively, or gets finalized in their favor, and you do have to reopen that thing, restate it, I would hope that you would charge them. So I think all of that needs to be in writing, because otherwise we just don't remember it, and then clients are indignant and upset. And but a lot of practitioners that I've talked about, they're like, hey, I barely feel like I'm finishing anything. We're getting a few things filed, but we're not being able to get as much, we're touching it, setting it down, touching it, setting it down, because we're waiting for one determination, whether it's a state unemployment insurance issue, or, who knows what. There's something that's holding a lot of that stuff up. And for practitioners, I know that's frustrating. Most of us like to see completion and feel resolved at the end of the day, that we got through a big pile. And I feel sorry that we're experiencing this, but everyone is experiencing it. And so I think you just being clear about it with clients and why it's happening, and that all this sort of legislation's happening real time, and SBA rules and all of those things that are coming together to impact you. So I just think, like Amy said, they don't know it unless you tell them.
Yeah. And along those communication lines, we're also seeing offices starting to go through reopening plans, and more people, coming back to the office, feeling more comfortable. So just staying on communication, I think it's really important to think through the future of this and not just let it happen, and then not think about how to control the experience. So one of the things is, we're going for, who knows, this may be the way of life going forward. And so in order to make sure that people still feel engaged and involved, how are you going to think through like a conference room meeting where there's some people in the conference room and there's some people on Zoom or Teams or wherever you have those video calls? It's really important to think about how you're inclusive to the people that are remote when you're in the room, because the problem is a lot of times when you're in the room together, you start talking because you're right next to someone, and that person on the phone starts checking out, or video starts checking out because they're not really involved with the conversation. They're not there. They don't know how to feed into the conversation, because there's just too much in the room to try to interrupt it, where you're like, remember me, so it's really important to think about your protocol of meetings in a hybrid situation, of, what the spacing is going to look like in the room. if you've got a video camera, how are you going to make sure everyone can be seen? That it's not, where if you're not in the room, you can't really see the people because they seem too far away, and you can't see their faces.
Or you see two of them. You can only see two of them.
Right. You can't see the room. So it might change how you set up seating and so forth. And then also, how do you include the people on video where you're actually calling them out to be part of the conversation, not forgetting that they're there?
And one of my biggest concerns with that, Amy, is sound. Mm-hmm. Most groups don't think about sound, and we can't hear the people on video as well unless we have speakers well placed through the room. They can't hear us either if there's not good microphones.
Right.
And so it can be a really crummy experience. And I expect that for a while in reopening, if not for a permanent, for firms who are going for borderless reach with talent and really looking at remote as a strategy, we're going to have this blended work environment forever. And so, my current advice on those kind of meetings where we have remote people and we have in-person people is everybody go to your desk or cube and get on Zoom or get on Teams. And we're going to have a remote meeting, some of us in the office and some of us at home. And that way we're on an equal playing field and we can all hear each other and see each other, and we don't have to worry about all those protocols. So, but that's a perfect example. And by the way, I don't think it's inappropriate to say that part of that, how distant are we in a conference room like that? Also, are we wearing masks? I know your state mandates will be different. And so for certain states listening to this, you're like, of course we'll wear masks. It's required. But in a state like mine, where there isn't a mask mandate, it could be awkward for people coming back to the office to step into a conference room and find that the managing partner and that some of the partners or whatever aren't wearing masks. I tell you what, if I put my foot near that door and saw that, I would put my foot back out because I haven't had my shots yet, and right. I don't want the disease, and I don't want to give it to others. So, being really clear about the safety protocols, and not just clear like here's what's expected, but what can people count on? If you communicate it like that, then some people may be more likely to come back to the office feeling safe, versus them having to guess how people are going to behave and be afraid that it's going to be inconsistently applied, and then, being unwilling to come and risk it as a result of that. So I think that we still have to talk about health and safety. We still have to talk about masks, hand sanitizer, whatever, obviously social distancing, and what the firm or what your organization or office is doing to protect people. And that isn't something you say one time. You have to say it ongoingly, especially as state protocols, federal protocols, whatever it is, change. And as you are planning to change and loosen up a little on that stuff, you've got to tell people that, so they're not surprised and they don't feel like they can't trust you to keep them safe or keep them informed.
Yeah. And, as well as thinking through the social aspect of being together. So, are you going to go to lunch together? Are you going to bring in lunch? And how are people going to be able to still be communal and create community? These are all things that are important, because for a staff person, they may feel the pressure of the FaceTime, but they're uncomfortable and not afraid to kind of up what they're uncomfortable about. So, and you don't want to lose that interaction and people meeting even one-on-one in an office or whatever that is, because those things are important. So this is where we're talking about contingency planning of, thinking through like what a normal day looked like before.
Yes.
And maybe what underlying expectations, even if they were unintentional, happen in an office. And how are you going to get people comfortable, but still interacting and creating community? Because that community is what creates culture. And, we've lost a lot of that not being together. So what will that look like as your offices reopen? Some people aren't there, some people are there. Are their careers going to be harmed if they don't show up?
I hope not.
And so forth. Yeah.
I hope not. I hope the answer is no to that, but I know that that's
Yeah.
a very, very real consideration. The other thing, and I just thought of this, is that, shots are being given in states at different ages and times. Some states are really doing a great job of cranking the shots. Others are taking a long time to get the shots to people. But shots are being given in general based on role, but also age. And one of the things I fear leaders will do is, as they all get their double vaccination or the Johnson & Johnson single, they're going to be like, hey, I feel pretty safe here. I don't want to wear a mask, and I feel like we should reopen full bore. And, and they're not going to pay attention to the fact that their 28-year-old staff members haven't had any shots yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want us to be super careful that we don't do selfish interest. I don't have empathy or compassion for anyone else now that I've gotten my shots, sort of leadership and management policy. We need to keep our people safe at all level, all ages, in all circumstances, and figure out how to, provide the right communal and office-based policies, but also support those that feel safer remote until it's safe, really safe, to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and wherever you can help people get those shots too is another employee benefit, you can think about, rather than them trying to figure it out or take time off or that sort of thing. If there's a way to really facilitate that for people that work, in your firm, I think that's important as well.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, where I am, it's by birth year. We're all registered and waiting. And then they call up your birth year, and then you get an email, and then you start trying to find your shot.
Right.
And, but I'm all kinds of people around me that are younger than I am have had them.
Yes.
But they've got them in different ways, inside track on them or something. So if firm leaders can find that inside track, or some populations are doing these mass, like under, in a stadium type vaccinations, and some of those are allowing folks that aren't in the exact age range or occupation in. So those are some, ways that you might find your way into a shot. And I know the more of us that are vaccinated, the more confidence we're going to have. But we're going to be blended or hybrid for a long time in who's immune and who's not. And of course, there's a bunch of contingency on how long that immunity lasts. And as this virus mutates, will all of a sudden the people who are vaccinated and feeling super safe be unsafe again? And so we have to really pay attention and not go too hog wild until we know better. And meanwhile, just having that compassion and empathy for those who are afraid.
Yeah.
And I just fear that will become an intolerance at some point, making wrong to those people. And I think that's going to be an anti-retention strategy for firm leaders if they step into that kind of stance.
Yeah. So we don't have enough time to get into the next topic, but the next topic was George Floyd trial, but that's its own thing. But we can keep it on its marker.
Well, I mean, I'll say one thing: like, they just are, struggling to get a jury, placed. So, but as that trial unfolds, the number one thing I would say about contingency planning is prepare for, a verdict that is a tough verdict against the defendant. And what might the public sentiment be about that? And what might you say as a firm leadership team about it, if anything? And then what happens if the verdict is not felt to be justice or tough enough, or even a not guilty verdict happens? What position will your firm take about that? Or what will you say about that? When that will very likely create another significant unrest and uprising that we saw last spring. And so, what is your firm's plan for that? I think that was my number one thing I wanted to get across on George Floyd, was start talking about that either way. And we don't know if it'll happen next week or the week after. We don't know how long the trial will last, but it's not going to happen a year from now. It's going to happen soon. And it could happen in the middle of all this deadline business. What if the deadline doesn't move to 4/15 and then this trial resolves itself right in there? What will your strategy be to keep people, feeling like the firm gets it, feeling like the firm supports diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice? And how can we help our people process whatever happens there? And hopefully still meet the needs of the business as we can. But we've got to meet the needs of our people and what they're feeling during that process, and we can't ignore it. So I do think there's some planning there.
Yeah. So you got it in. So
Thank you. Had to, because I don't know when it'll happen. I don't know if it's next Friday or when.
Yeah. So, well,
speaking of next Friday, we're off.
We're off next Friday.
Yes, we are. We're going to take it off, Amy and I. And so we'll be here the Friday that follows that, which I think is the 26th of March.
So we want to wish luck as they close out March 15th, and have a great weekend, everybody. If you're going to have time to have a weekend.
Right. Well, I hope it's productive. I hope it's fulfilling. If it's not restful, I hope it's fulfilling and productive.
There we go. So, but hopefully we've given you a few food for thought as you come out of this for planning for the future. So thanks again for being with us on our Friday lunch chat. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.